what is your fire going to achieve? And there's lots of different types of fires, right? You can have a very tightly constrained fire that achieves a very specific outcome. For example, heating a pan of hot water on a gas stove, or a bonfire outside that wants to do something very specific, right? Or in a car engine even, that one spark that ignites the fuel that allows the car to go that extra little bit. They're very highly constrained, purposeful, value-driven fires. But if you have an unconstrained fire, it means that it's like a wildfire or a flash fire, which kind of burns indiscriminately. And so as a leader, as we're setting to, because all leaders try to influence outcomes in some way. So you're starting a fire. What's the fire that you're wanting to build? For what purpose? How are you going to constrain the fire to make sure it's for good and not for bad?
Hi, I'm Carolyn, Swora, host of Evolve, a New Era of Leadership. And today's guest is coming to us from the other side of the world. His name is Mark Bateman. And Mark released a new book earlier this year called Disruptive Leadership. Today, we're going to talk about his book. What is disruption? What are the different elements of disruptive leadership? And hey, let's see where that goes, because I think we all know one thing is that status quo is not the reality of the environments that we work in. Looking forward to this conversation with Mark. And hey, just a few more things about him. Mark is the CEO of WeQual. He calls himself a visionary disruptor. He's a corporate advisor and an executive coach. He's got a really keen focus on purpose and how that impacts how we lead. He partners with several global leaders across the world to spark impactful, enduring change, and offers some really unique insights to help foster this authentic and influential leadership. Welcome to Evolve, a New Era of Leadership. I'm your host, Carolyn Swora, and today we are talking with Mark Bateman, coming to us from a very lovely place in the world. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure.
It is. I'm really excited to have you on the show. I know you wrote this book called Disruptive Leadership, so we're going to dig into that. And I guess I know you're coming to us. We started talking before we pressed record about this beautiful location you're at, but I'm going to guess it links into your book and all that you do and sort of your why behind this. Is there some sort of connection between why you do this work and where you live right now?
Gosh, that's actually a really interesting question. So hello, everybody. Yes, I'm based on a tiny little rock, literally in the middle of the Mediterranean, called Malta. And if you're on the West Coast or Western Hemisphere, US, Canada, etc., I'll give you 10 out of 10 if you know exactly where it is. If you imagine the very southern tip of Italy and you imagine the very northern tip of North Africa, Malta sits between those two places. So actually the northern tip of Africa is further north than Malta, which is quite interesting. So we're in the Mediterranean, which basically means it's a better kind of temperature all year round, 300 days of sunshine. And is my decision to be here deliberate? 100% it is. We were just talking just previously, like, why Malta? So
why did you go to Malta?
Why did I go to Malta? So we started WeQual, which is the company that I'm the CEO of. Basically, I joined during COVID, right? So during the lockdown of first period of COVID. And I had a 2-bedroom apartment in London, and my office was in the second bedroom, and it was due north. And if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you'll know if you have an office that's facing due north, you never see the sun.
No sunlight.
I'm a kind of a sun worshipper. You know what I mean? Like the sun.
Even as a Brit, you're a sun worshipper. I don't think
exactly.
you were there.
Even more so. Do you know? I've never been to Scotland, which is North UK, because why would you want to go north if you can go south? Right? This has been very much my mantra my entire life. So always go to the sun. And I remember, doing a startup with my business partner, Katie Litchfield. Katie actually said to me at one point, I'd been to Cyprus, which is also in the Mediterranean. And she goes, Mark, if you don't move to the sun, I worry about the future of WeQual.
Wow.
Which was an incredibly validating and affirming thing, because I'd been talking about moving to the sun for a long time. Now, because we set up the business during COVID, it meant that our entire business is remote. All of our staff are remote. They all work from home. And so there was no reason not to. All of our clients, big corporates around the world. So COVID in the nicest ways kind of did us a favor, because no company ever expected us to go and visit them because it was COVID. So it really didn't matter where I was. And Malta, I'd visited before. I knew I needed to get out to the UK. Grayness doesn't do me any good. So I didn't think I'd be able to stay in Malta, because the UK did something really amazingly wonderful called Brexit.
Yep.
Which meant they left the EU, which means you can only stay in the European Union for 90 days out of 180. So when I came to Malta, I thought I'd be able to stay maximum a month. I'd have to go to India or America or somewhere else. Then I heard about a digital nomad visa, and 2 and a bit years later, I'm still here.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So here's what I'm hearing, Mark. Disruption. You disrupted your life.
Well, truthfully, I decided on the Monday before Christmas, just over 2 years ago. By the Thursday of that week, I'd got rid of everything in my apartment.
Wow.
On the Friday, I saw my family, my parents, etc. Christmas Day was the Saturday. On midnight Christmas Day, I booked the flight to Malta because I had no idea where I was going to go. I had 3 suitcases, and I landed in Malta on Boxing Day. And then I thought, well, everything we do is over Zoom. You know, we're meeting all these incredible people, all these incredible leaders worldwide, but it's all over Zoom. I can Airbnb for a month. And I realized very quickly that wasn't going to work, because as the CEO, doing lots of one-on-one coaching, sales meetings, etc., I needed the professional background.
Right.
I needed the stability. So my daughter, who was actually in New Zealand at the time, said, Dad, have you heard about the digital nomad visa? And as soon as I heard about that, I thought, that's it. So that was the Monday now. So Monday after Boxing Day. By the Friday, which was New Year's Eve, I'd found an apartment, signed the contract on a 3-year lease. And here I am.
So you wrote this book called Disruptive Leadership, and it just came out earlier this year, if I'm correct.
It did, January the 23rd, yes.
Yeah. So what's the tie here between this big disruption, this big decision that you made, and disruptive leadership? Like, why did you write this book, and how is it?
So I've not been asked that question. I mean, you're in a similar sort of field, right? Life is so short.
Yeah.
And, you know, certainly in my coaching practice, life is short. So how are you ensuring that your life is the life that you want to live?
Yeah.
And we can put off so many decisions. We can not be aware of what we truly want. So I'm I try at least to be very purposeful. And it's certainly in terms of the underlying philosophy behind both as the CEO of WeQual, but also in my coaching practice, is that very strong sense of purpose with awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad I asked you a question no one's asked you yet. So Mark, what inspired you to write this book? Why did you want to bring it into the world?
I think probably most people, certainly if you get to a place of, I don't know, maybe just if you have an ego, I don't know. But I think most people probably think that maybe they have a book in them, right? But I remember, so the outset of the book, I'd been involved in another startup. So I'm pretty entrepreneurial by nature. And so I think I was in my 3rd startup, or maybe is it my 4th? I think it was my 4th. And I'd given 2 years of my life to a startup that it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And I realized actually if we were to succeed, I wouldn't be doing the thing that I believe I'm on this earth to do. And so I had to make a very difficult decision at this point. Do I basically walk away from 2 years of giving everything that I had, you know, money, blood, sweat, tears, everything? And the answer to that question was yes. And so I did. And I sat down and I asked myself, okay, Mark, what is it you really want to do professionally, right?
Yeah.
What is it you want to do? I thought, well, I want to work with the world's most senior leaders. Okay. Who do you need to be able to do that? And I thought, well, I need to be able to walk into a room where there are CEOs, and for at least a number of those CEOs to note that I've walked into the room. And when they see me, whether it's subconsciously or otherwise, they'll think, he's got something that I want. And I thought, okay, so what is it I need to have when I walk into that room such that those CEOs would think that? I thought, I need to be walking in with a certain amount of energy. And my energy, my vibration, if you like, needs to be at a frequency that they're operating at such that they need what I have in some way. There's some synergy there. And I thought, okay, am I there? No, I'm not. I'm exhausted. I'm burnt out. I really need to restore my energy. And so I gave myself permission I've just moved to London at this point, to take time out and I had no money, but my father had lent me some money. So I knew worst. There's a whole story here. I was utterly penniless at this point. I'd moved
Wow.
into my sister's house in London in her spare bedroom, and not what you expect when you're whatever I was, 50 years old or what have you. And I thought, well, I'm not going to chase just doing something. I want to be true to who I am. And how am I going to do that? Well, it's about this energy piece.
Hmm.
And so I gave myself permission to, at that time, I wasn't even sure what I was giving myself permission to do, other than it wasn't to chase work. It
Right.
was to chase me. It was to reconnect back to myself. And so I'd spend hours just walking around London, sitting in the amazing royal parks that exist in London. And I found myself, it's going to sound strange or alternative to some maybe, but I would just be staring at a tree for like an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. And it's as if the universe opened up and I started to see something that I'd never seen before. And throughout this, when I was thinking about what I really wanted to do and work with senior leaders, and I thought, well, do I want to run a leadership retreat? What would that look like? Well, I'd want to take them away for 5 days. Well, what would I do? And I planned it all out. I've done a master's in leadership coaching. Oh no, wait a minute. I'm just going to do the same as what everybody else has done. And
Mm.
especially if it's this executive level, they've already
Right.
done every single course known to mankind.
Right.
So I can't just regurgitate everything that everybody's already done before. It needs to be something that's kind of fresh, something that's insightful. Okay, fine. And so, but it was during these, you could call it meditation, reflection,
Yep.
sitting there with no agenda, giving myself permission to be and to experience. And it was literally as if I started seeing, and it's going to sound very alternative now, but it's literally as if I could start to see energy flow before I started coming across any of the books or podcasts or anything else related to law of attraction or energy or vibration or anything else. But I started seeing something I'd never seen before. And this analogy of fire came to me.
Mm.
And through my childhood, my dad had been a church minister. That's the calling that I'd sensed earlier on in my life, that I was going to go into the church. I knew the Bible very well. It also talks about the refiner's fire, as in fire cleanses and purifies.
Okay.
And I started thinking about this analogy of fire in the context to leadership
Yep.
and organizations. And that was the birth of my book. Because I'm going, well, how do you start a fire? How do you grow a fire? How do you protect a fire? How do you stop yourself from burning out? This fire just came alive. And then I spent the next 6 months writing my book.
Wow. I can't help but think, Mark, that sort of some of the similarities that I saw when I started my business. Well, no, I guess it was a few years in. So I call myself a human spirit igniter,
Right.
which really came
Yeah.
down to how can we spark
Yeah.
that fire that's in us? Because I don't believe it ever gets put out. It might get diminished and it might
Yep.
settle in the embers for a little bit. But I'm with you. I think it's there, and
And what would you say
energy.
is what would you say is at the very heart of, let's go with that rekindling for a moment, right? So
Yeah.
somebody who maybe feels that they've lost their spark, lost the fire in their belly, lost their purpose, whatever it is, from your experience, like that reigniter or igniter of the human spirit, which I love, like what is that for you? What's the core aspect of that?
The core aspect of that is really kind of similar to what you said, is giving yourself permission to look at life through different lenses, giving
Mm,
yourself permission to step off the hamster wheel of
mm,
life.
mm,
And that's hard because it literally is a drug that
mm,
just kind
mm,
of keeps us going. And I think when we do find something will pull us out of that. There will be something stronger. I think that is part of the fire. I think at a point,
mm,
and maybe age is part of it, where it'll just sort of start to just rumble up, and you do find the space and you have those moments and you start to look at other things like energy or frequency. Those are all different ways that can help, not can, they will help people be better leaders,
mm,
but it's different than what we've grown up with or what we're
mm,
told about or what we
mm,
see in mainstream
mm,
leadership work.
mm.
What do you think?
Yeah, for me, I think the core aspect is getting back to our purpose.
Mm.
Who are you? Why are you here? ultimately there's all different questions that we can ask ourselves to help us determine if we're not clear about our own personal sense of purpose. But what's the legacy? What's the impact that we want to leave?
Yeah.
What is it we want to be known for? What really matters to us? And that's, as you say, if we get stuck on that hamster wheel where either we daren't ask ourselves that question, or we've never stopped to ask ourselves that question, life has a way of suddenly stopping the hamster wheel through illness or through some trauma or whatever it happens to be.
Yep.
And then if we take that opportunity and ask those really horrible, deep, uncomfortable questions and sit with it, then if we're not, I always thought I was really purposeful in everything I did, and yet I've still had a number of periods in my life.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I don't want to say one of the secrets, but I think that's one of the biggest challenges of leadership is, are you truly connected to who you are? Because your true purpose won't show up unless you've got a very true connection. And I've known you for 15 minutes here, but my guess is that with age comes a bit of wisdom and some experiences that help us really, truly connect to who we are.
I think only if we allow ourselves to. I think all of us, it's that whether we want to stay in our comfort zone, which may actually be uncomfortable, but becomes our comfort zone, or whether we're willing to leave our comfort zone for the discomfort of where we may find out something more about ourselves or our purpose, or if we're a leader in an organization, what that means. I don't think it's a given that age equals wisdom. So
love it. Yeah. And do you find that with your clients?
What's interesting now is, just a bit of backdrop on WeQual, if I may. So WeQual is, its mission statement is to drive gender equality within the world's largest organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So we tend to work with maybe the top 1,000 companies in the world by revenue or market cap. And we have, amazing relationships with CEOs, CHROs, and then all these amazing women that either sit at the C-suite -1 or maybe -2. We just launched something for manager level. So we're meeting amazingly talented women, and we have a WeQual awards process where we seek to identify and then showcase women that are ready for a C-suite role through a whole basically assessment process, which culminates in an interview with a global CEO. So one thing that I am constantly amazed at is how amazing these women are, and obviously they're women, even if they feel that they got there by chance or very driven, clearly very capable. Not all of them are actually even aware of their own personal sense of purpose. And yet here they are at the very top, driving global change in some way or other. What was your question again?
Well, the age, it was about the age with wisdom.
Age,
and you said that it's not always that wisdom isn't necessarily attached to age.
No. I think we could probably all think of, leaders on the world stage who, if we said, are they wise? No.
Right.
Do they have great influence? Yes. Do they have great power? Yes. Are they ego driven or status driven? Yes. Are they wise? No. So I actually generally, there's a completely separate topic, but I do believe there's a dearth of quality leaders at a global level in terms of countries.
What do you mean by that? There's a dearth of leaders.
Maybe I don't want to touch really on politics, but I'm talking about politics. I'm talking about prime ministers. I'm talking about, state leaders. Who is there right now who, through their actions, are demonstrating a purposeful, dare I say, humanistic approach based on awareness, based on a desire to do what's right for humanity versus personal status, personal ego.
My belief with that, Mark, is that the system is bigger than the individual in those instances. And until there's sort of a mass amount of leaders willing to really shift the system, which we haven't seen yet, but I do have hope that it will happen. We are going to see different types of leaders in those roles. And it kind of comes back to the energy, the frequency that you were talking about. There's not a lot of healing type frequency operating in those types of systems.
if for people who have not heard this frequency bit or think it's too alternative, I'm going to give an example of what I mean by that. So, and I often use this in my coaching analogies as well. So If you're a leader that is unclear about your sense of direction, you're off in some way. You're not clear. Maybe for you personally, Carolyn, you're focused on this understanding how previous traumas basically are driving your leadership style and influence today. So let's imagine you as a leader are leading, but the way that you're behaving is actually because of a past trauma. So maybe as a result of that past trauma, you're wanting to be a perfectionist, or you're very driven, or actually you're seeking to protect your own ego at all costs, as
Right.
3 examples. So when you are now emitting your frequency, your vibration, it could be the equivalent of a D sharp, right?
Yep.
In musical terms. Now, I always use the example of if you have a room that has a piano in it and it has a guitar in it, and I sit down on the piano and it's well tuned, it's a well tuned piano, and I play middle A, provided the guitar is in tune, the A string will start to vibrate. Right? Synergy. If I play a middle E, provided the guitar is in tune, actually the lower E and the higher E will start to vibrate. So if I'm a leader and I'm setting a direction, I'm really clear and I'm giving a really clear E, I want to attract those low and high E's, if you like.
Right.
If I play a D sharp, for those that didn't see, Carolyn's face just screwed up, then only badly tuned guitars are going to respond.
Yeah.
So for me, that's kind of a very clear working example of what I mean by energy or vibration or frequency.
Yeah.
How clear are you? Oh, how messy is it?
How messy or clear do you think leaders are being while they lead?
Well, all of us bring mess because it's a part of being human.
Right.
And I think those quality leaders, and this is kind of ultimately where I arrive at in the book, when you're starting a fire, what is your fire going to achieve? And there's lots of different types of fires, right? You can have a very tightly constrained fire that achieves a very specific outcome. For example, heating a pan of hot water on a gas stove, or a bonfire outside that wants to do something very specific, right? Or in a car engine even, that one spark that ignites the fuel that allows the car to go that extra little bit. They're very highly constrained, purposeful, value-driven fires. But if you have an unconstrained fire, it means that it's like a wildfire or a flash fire, which kind of burns indiscriminately. And so as a leader, as we're setting to, because all leaders try to influence outcomes in some way. So you're starting a fire. What's the fire that you're wanting to build? For what purpose? How are you going to constrain the fire to make sure it's for good and not for bad? And so this is why I come to it. And ultimately, it's quality leadership that defines how you start a fire, how you grow a fire, how you protect a fire.
Nice. Well, and Mark, have you run into examples where the fire, the purpose behind the fire, where the leader feels pretty clear on it, but you're sensing a disconnect? Does that happen often?
I think there's probably different ways to answer your question. It depends exactly what you mean. But leaders can be driving change, but not understand why they're doing it.
And they can still be good at it.
Very good at it. Yeah, because they're very intelligent, very capable, very driven, got lots of experience. Go and do X, Y, and Z, go and increase market share in this territory, go and transform the digital strategy for how we engage with our customers, whatever it happens to be. Yeah, they're super capable, very capable. But one of my favorite questions I ask anybody is, why? Like, why are you doing what you're doing?
Because I'm just going to give you an example. Because I want to be a good role model for my kids.
Okay, well, that's a great example, right? Why do you want to be a great role model, and why this thing?
And then digging down from there.
Yeah.
I have a bit of a belief that the system that we have to operate in to be successful and productive can really quickly blind us or get in the way of us connecting to our why. Is that a belief that you see or that you have or that you see?
Yeah, for sure. No, for sure. Because, quality leaders, for me, those that achieve meaningful purpose. So my professional purpose is to enable leaders to achieve meaningful purpose. That's my one sentence that I've distilled over many years. And so I know in any conversation I have with any leader anywhere in the world, in fact, anybody, but any leader anywhere in the world, ultimately it's about that. So I want to know, what are you about? Like, what's the difference you're on this planet to make? And do you understand why? And do you understand maybe how past trauma is driving your behaviors today? And if you're not, where are the past traumas from your childhood? Basically, they've created your superpowers today, right? Because that's your adaptability, your survival instinct is you to get what you needed as a child, you develop superpowers. But now where are your superpowers becoming your kryptonite?
Right.
So this essence of superpower and kryptonite is all around self-awareness, which is around personal development, personal growth minded, being a curious learner, staying open. I want to grow. I want to develop. And I want to ensure that ultimately the fire, the thing that I do, is as clean, as pure, as good as it can be.
I just had an image of a campfire that was like, if you put like yucky things in it, like plastic, or
Exactly.
and it will give like just a smell and it won't be healthy. And so when you said clean fire, that really hit.
So within my book, when I talk about starting a fire has three components: heat, fuel, oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So I've defined heat ultimately as purpose in action, because the moment you start expending energy in the pursuit of something, you generate heat because there's an action involved. Like if you rub your hands together, you generate heat. So the moment you get about doing something, physics shows us it generates heat.
Yep.
So the moment you say, wait a minute, I'm not happy with this situation, I'm going to change it. Or I want to start a business to do whatever it happens to be. Or I want to, whatever the difference is that you seek. And yes, the moment you start expending energy, and it can be in any context, it can be community centered, it can be in your family, it can be in an organization, it can be a startup, it can be anywhere.
Right.
The moment you set about trying to bridge a gap, cross a divide, the difference you see, you have to expend energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's energy over time, which generates heat.
Okay.
As you set about that, you start to attract fuel, which is people, ideally wonderful, talented, amazing people, and cash, right? Your resources.
Right.
So you need that. And then your oxygen is your market, your customers, those that you seek to influence in some way. Mm-hmm. So if I want to start a fire, I've got to bring the right level of heat.
Yep.
I've got to be able to attract the right fuel to impact the market, to get the oxygen that I need. If I want to grow my fire, I have to increase my heat. I have to attract increasing levels of fuel which is the cash and people, and ensure I have a following headwind, right? There's more and more oxygen coming my way.
Right. Needs to be blowing into the fire. Yeah.
I need to make sure that there isn't a headwind that's only going to steal my oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
I need to make sure that I don't burn out my people, right? Because my people is my fuel. I want to burn it out, because otherwise my fire goes out. So that comes down to me as a quality leader. How do I do all of that? How do I ensure I stay as a quality leader with the right amount of heat, where I'm not burning too hot, burning everything out, or burning too cold, or not cleanly enough, causing trouble everywhere?
Right.
How do I ensure that I maximize our cash and allow our people to be engaged in a purpose, in a mission, in achieving something that's worthwhile and meaningful? And then ensuring that we're connecting with our market such that they're buying us from us, or whatever it is that you're doing.
And so in your experience, do you find with those three pieces, the heat, the fuel, and the oxygen, is there a typical pathway that you see? Are there typical areas out of those three things that are less developed than others?
For me, it always comes down to leadership, because the leader sets the tone on everything. I say in the book, the moment you even have one direct report, you're now in charge of another person, really, during the hours of 9 and 5 or whatever hours you work. When can they go to lunch? What should they wear? What should their language be? Can they swear or not swear?
Yeah.
If you swear, they're likely to swear. If you dress really smart, you're setting an expectation that they have to be really smart. If you work really long hours, you're setting an expectation that they have to work really long hours. If you're really clear about what you want this individual to do, then they're going to be really clear. If you're really unclear, sending mixed messages, if you're micromanaging, or if you're whatever your approach is as a manager, you're having now a direct impact on that one person.
Right.
And multiply that by 5 or by 10 or by 100 or by 1,000 or by 10,000 or 100,000. So quality leadership is so important, because it's only quality leadership that sets the clear purpose, which has the vision, the mission, and the values.
Right.
That attracts the right fuel. And as human beings, we're amazing, right? Because if we run out of our energy during the day, but provided we rest well overnight,
we get more.
We're amazing, absolutely incredible. But time, gone, right? Time, that's it, gone. So how do we not only use our own energy and our own time, but actually how do we use the energy and the time of our people as well?
Right.
How do we engage them in something? And engagement means they bring, if I can say, they bring of their all during work hours, but you don't want to burn them out. You
Right.
want to enable and create an environment for them to grow and develop. That's leadership. And then how you engage with the markets, with your customers, that's leadership. Because what's the messaging? What's the communication?
Right.
How are you prioritizing what you're working on? How do you prioritize what the customer needs? Are you meeting that need? Are you communicating with them? Are you clear as to your sense of purpose, which comes through in all your marketing
I was
materials
going to
and everything?
say that purpose just disseminates over everything.
It
It's the
does.
why, right? It's the why behind
It's
what we
the
do.
why. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at the sort of the new form of leadership that you're calling, for me, this, some might see it as idealistic or utopia, but it's this purpose-centered
Yeah.
leadership, right? And therefore purpose-centered organizations. And I think there's so many leaders, managers, people in the world that want to belong as part of something that is truly meaningful. But how can they? If it's a listed company with shareholder returns and then does the company lose its soul? That's a more difficult question.
It is. Well, so why did you call the book Disruptive Leadership, which kind of ties into how do we disrupt ourselves as leaders to really connect to that deep, true purpose?
So I called the book Disruptive Leadership, and I thought long and hard about the title
Yeah,
because
it's
some
hard.
see it.
Titles are hard for a book.
Titles are hard. I could have called it Make a Difference or, Leave a Legacy or
Yep.
Impact but it was my working title right from the very beginning, because to me, if you want to make a difference, you have to challenge the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
And not only do you have to challenge the status quo, you have to change the status quo. Well, that is the definition of disruption. To disrupt means you literally change, you challenge and change the status quo. So as a leader, you are continuously battling against status quo,
Yep.
always. So that's why disruptive, because it is. Any
Well,
moment you want to change something, you're being disruptive.
exactly. And I come back to what I said earlier about systems. If we're going to disrupt systems, we need to disrupt ourselves first so that we have the energy, we have the frequency, we have the stamina and the resolution and the why to do things differently. It's not for the faint of heart at all.
It's not. It's very difficult. And I was literally just coaching somebody earlier on. I think one of the hardest things for any one of us is to take full responsibility for our own lives.
Say more about that. What do you mean?
It's so easy to fall into the trap of doing something because we believe others expect us to, or because it's the status quo. So I say in the book, the status quo is like a powerful cartel that seeks to protect its own.
Yeah.
Right. So it seeks to protect where the power currently sits. And anybody that comes along and tries to challenge that, the status quo, the cartel will actively resist you. So any disruption you want to lead, this is why to me purpose is so important, because if you're just pursuing money or status or ego, you may be successful in that, but you're ultimately not really going to change the world. In fact, you're likely to start a wildfire of some kind. You're likely to cause harm either to yourself, but certainly to your followers. So disruptive leadership, the whole title is Disruptive Leadership Using Fire to Drive Purposeful Change, because fire is always disruptive.
It is.
Like, when you meet somebody and they are so passionate about the change they want to make, it does not matter what you say to them. You can call them mad, you can call them delusional, you can resist them at every turn, but they will keep going regardless, because there's like a fire in their own belly. They can't stop, right? They just can't stop.
Yeah.
And that's why they will then attract fuel and they will impact the market, because they're generating heat wherever they go. They will not stop. And for me, that is the core requirement, determinant of any successful business over the long term as well, is to stay true to purpose.
Right.
We've all heard the example of Kodak, right? Now, the original vision statement was to make photography as simple as using a pencil. I love that vision statement. Like that every business decision should be really clear, and that's the thing that's written on the wall.
Right.
And yet they became the mass dominant player in film. They had the vast majority of the market share. They're making really good margins. Some guy in a lab coat sometime in the 1970s, deep down underground, created the first digital image. That's going to stop. And so they'd moved away from their purpose. Their purpose was to make photography as simple as using a pencil.
Yep.
And they actively shut it down.
Well, and that's where ego came in too. It was just like, well, that's not going to happen. Blockbuster is a similar story.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I think of it, I used to work at Blockbuster
Oh, wow.
when I was in school, and I just think of the arrogance that might be every
Yeah.
time I watch Netflix or some streaming service. It's like, how did people sitting around a table actually
Yep.
think that people would want to go pick up a box?
Especially as Blockbusters had the opportunity to buy Netflix.
I know. There was no fire going on there. There was some bad fuel.
Well, so another component of the book is how do you maintain or how do you protect the fire that you have? Because a
Okay.
fire will automatically burn out over time unless you keep feeding it with heat, fuel, and oxygen. So I talk about there's 3 levels of thinking that takes place inside an organization. The organization that is able to maintain sustainable competitive advantage over the long term does what I call level 3 thinking.
Okay.
Level 1 thinking, which is where circa 55% of most managers and leaders operate at, is level 1 thinking, which is, am I getting it right?
Okay.
So it's a focus on kind of on the here and the now, binary decision making. It's potentially validation. I don't want to take any risks. I want to play it safe. You're almost pretty much playing into the status quo, right? It is the basis of how we learn a new skill, right?
Yep.
You have to understand what's right and what's wrong. There is an aspect maybe of governance and compliance where you want to be able to answer the question, am I getting it right?
Yep.
The trouble is, though, if you only rely on level 1 thinking, you don't know you're asking the right questions. You can be putting ticks in lots of boxes, but they don't mean anything. They're the wrong questions. So I remember I was working with National Grid, which are the big UK power infrastructure company in the UK and some of North America. And we were talking about the regulatory compliance aspect. And they were saying, well, surely this is where we need the level 1 thinking. I'm going, well, talk to me about your level 1 thing. So they started explaining what was happening. And they were like, I can't remember all the details, a number of years ago, but they were spending a lot of time pulling together lots of data to prove that they were meeting the regulatory requirements. And I'm like, yeah, but are they the right regulatory requirements?
Yeah.
What questions are you actually trying to answer here? You could spend a month, every single month, proving that you're answering question X in the right way. And then something really terrible happens. You realize you're asking yourself the wrong question. So actually, no, right? When you're training somebody, yes, you do want them to go yes, no, yes, no, yes, no.
Right.
The level 2 question is, are we doing the right thing? Oh,
am I asking the right questions?
It's challenging assumptions. It's challenging beliefs. It's far more difficult to answer that question. Far more difficult. There's no simple answer anymore. I have to spend some time thinking about this.
Right.
I don't know. There's some stuff I don't know. Well, that makes us feel uncomfortable. It's far easier to stay with level 1 thinking. Yes, no. All right. Yep. Level 2, hang on. Am I doing the right thing? Well, I think I am, but I'm not sure. Well, how do I find out?
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's often where coaches might come in or consultants might come in, somebody from the outside, or a good manager operating at that level, maybe circa-ish, 40-ish% of managers operate at that level.
Okay.
And then the top 5% of leaders operate at level 3 thinking, which is, you ready for this? How do we decide what's right?
Wow. And so can you go back to that example with Kodak? Let's go through that with Kodak or Blockbuster.
So Kodak. So level 1 thinking, maintain market share.
Yep.
Right? Protect the numbers.
Okay. We don't need to worry about digital stuff.
No. And nobody's ever going to tell us we're getting it wrong if we're protecting the numbers. Yep. Nobody, ever. Market share, we're good. So the level 2 question is, are we doing the right thing? Oof, are we doing the right thing? Well, you could argue, well, there's no way we could foresee that this, whoever his name was, who probably was a he, but whoever created this first digital image, who could have known where that was going to go? Great question. Don't know. Because level 2 starts to bring in some unknowns, some uncertainties. How do we as leaders deal with uncertainty, with not knowing, and yet we still have to set clear direction?
Yep.
So level 3 question is, how do we decide what's right? Well, our vision is, or our purpose is, making photography as simple as using a pencil. Hang on, have we moved away from why are we in film? How is film helping us make photography as simple as using a pencil? Oof.
Brilliant.
Right? The importance of purpose. It is so simple. It's so simple to say.
Yeah.
It is so hard to do. And it comes back to energy and time. So the companies that maintain sustainable competitive advantage over the long term are asking themselves that third question. And it's actually about learning how to learn. It's like thinking about thinking. It starts to do your head in when you think about it. But in the same way as you can think about how you think, you learn about how you learn. So in our last board meeting, what worked and what didn't work? what were the powerful questions and how could we improve them? And how do they fit with our values, with our mission, and with our vision?
Yep.
So integrity, we have integrity as a value that we've nailed to the wall somewhere inside our corporate office building. Okay. Well, I'll be walking the talk here. What does integrity mean for us as a board? What does integrity mean for us as an executive committee, as a leadership team, as a department, as a team? What does it actually mean? What does it look like? Ooh, they are really tough questions.
They are. And they're not hard questions. Like, so hard to integrate them in. And I'll come back to like getting off of that hamster wheel of doing things the way that we usually do. Yeah. Oh, Mark, where can people find your book? We don't have to go to Malta to get it, do we?
No, you're very welcome to. If you go onto Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, just look for Disruptive Leadership, Mark Bateman, and you'll find it. It's got big Disruptive Leadership written in orange and white on the title. So what's amazing is, so I wrote the first draft pre-COVID, if we can remember when that was.
Yeah.
And actually COVID now is this kind of weird blip that we've completely forgotten about until somebody mentions. And then we think, oh yeah, there was that whole period, right, where the world stopped and everything changed. And now here we are again. And then again, Katie Litchfield, my business partner, I said, I've written this book. And she said to me 2 years ago, Mark, you've written a book, you need to get it published. I went, I don't have time. We're growing this business. I don't have time. No, Mark, you can't write a book and not publish it.
Yeah.
I said, well, what I really want to do is I want to interview some of these amazing leaders that I now know as a result of working with WeQual, right? You know, major CEOs and all these incredible women around the world. And so that's exactly what we did. So I interviewed about 14 or 15 just outstanding leaders globally across different sectors, different geographies, etc. Then I paid for a ghostwriter. I said, ghostwriter, I said, I have no idea if I've got anything that's good here or not. But here it is. Can you work your magic, please? And can you incorporate these interviews that I've done? So she got rid of about half.
Yep.
Basically, all the old examples where I'd written about Kodak and Blockbusters and all of those. Got rid of all of those because like everybody knows about those, Mark, and put in these living examples. And so, that took me 2 years.
Yeah.
And on top of trying to grow a business. So January 23rd, and within 2 days, it got to Amazon #1 across various business categories,
amazing.
which
congratulations.
It was such a strange feeling after so long, because it's a bit like I wrote it so long ago, and in the last 2 years, it's like number 99 on my priority list, right? And yet I remember, so the first day it came out, and because the network through WeQual, etc., it definitely helped, and it helped with a few chairs and a few CEOs posting on LinkedIn, etc. Thank you so much. And I got to number 2 across various categories at the end of the first day, and I thought,
so close.
Do you know what, Mark? And you have 2 days. The way Amazon works, don't ask me how or why. You have 2 days.
Yeah.
And well, how am I going to feel if I got to number 2? Well, it's, by any measure, it's still a remarkable achievement. And when I first sat down to write the book, the idea that I would have all these interviews in there and I'd get to number 2 would be remarkable. I just like that would have been a dream come true. Yeah, but so close to number 1. And then the next morning I woke up and my team said, Mark, you've only done it. You've only gone and done it. And it's like,
yay.
It was incredible. It was incredible.
Well, I'm going to encourage all the listeners out there to get into your bookstore, whatever platform you like to purchase off of, and have a look at this book. I really love your analogy, your work behind it, and your why. Your purpose behind this is wonderful and deep and rich.
So the reason why I wrote it when I did was because I wanted to figure out how to work with leaders in a different way outside of an MBA or an executive development program. But I've written in my acknowledgement section, Dad, in a strange way, this book is written for you, because I saw my dad as a leader, church leader, from a very small boy. And without even realizing it, I wanted him to succeed. And rightly or wrongly, I believed at the time I could see why he was and why he wasn't. I was studying leadership from being knee high. Wow. And so I'm very aware of why I do what I do today. And it is in such a large part because of my dad, whom I love dearly. And I'm so grateful that he's alive. And in many senses, it's everything I wish my dad had known, but never had access to.
Wow.
So that is very personal to me as well.
Yeah. Which you can absorb that. You can feel that. We're back to frequency when that's in there for people. Shout out to Mark's dad.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Mark, as usual, with amazing, rich, deep conversation, it goes by really fast.
Very
so
quickly.
I'm sad to say that we have to head into wrap-up mode.
Yes,
So usually with that, I ask 3 questions, all the guests. Are you ready for those 3 questions?
I am. Just
All
thankfully
right.
you prepared me.
Well, the first question has to do a lot of like what we were talking about, self-awareness, that if we're going
Mm.
to build this spark and understand our purpose, what is a moment? A lot of people have different moments or times they can remember where their awareness went from here to, oh, whoa, this isn't what I thought it was, but it really opened their eyes. So just curious if there's a statement, an anecdote, something that you'd like to share about your
The
own
difficulty is
self-awareness.
choosing which one. I think I'm going to. Yeah, I think I'm going to share. When I started my masters in leadership coaching, my first marriage was ending. I've been married 22 years, and in our desperate bid to keep the marriage alive and working, we both went into therapy. I started training as a psychotherapist, and I started this masters in leadership coaching. So it's pretty full on intense, as you can probably imagine. And I felt that I was failing in who I was as a person, as a man.
Wow.
And I remember doing, you probably heard of it, Myers-Briggs type indicator MBTI. It's kind of evolved itself a little bit into insights and other things. But anyway, and it was my first experience of a psychometric tool. I remember completing it and I came out with the 4 letters and then I read the description about myself. And I remember exactly where I was. I was at Derby University in the Midlands in the UK. It was a Saturday. And as I read it, there were tears just started streaming down my face because I was reading me. It was very powerful. And up to that point, I felt like I was wrong. I needed to change who I was, right? There was something fundamentally wrong with me in some way because that's the feedback I'd had over years. And yet I'm reading that I'm like, whatever it was, in 4% of the population, whatever the number was.
Yeah.
But they were describing the strengths of my personality type. And that was very powerful, actually. I've done a lot since, and I have a mixed perspective on psychometric tools. But for me in that moment, it was very validating.
Sounds like it
For
just
sure.
opened the door a little bit for you to see a side that you hadn't really seen of yourself before.
It brought a sense of validation for who I am. That there is a remarkable strength to who I am in a good way. And all right, it didn't suit every situation or every circumstance. Sure, we're all different, but it was very personally validating to read, in a sense, me on a page and go, there's others like me, for starters,
Wow.
right? I'm
Yep.
not weird.
I'm
I'm
not the only
not
one.
broken. I'm not any of those things. And actually, these are real strengths. This is why I am the way I am. It was a
Yeah.
very powerful moment.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Second question. What is a ritual, a practice, something that you do that helps you stay connected to your purpose, to be present, more regulated?
I'd say 2 things. One, breathing.
Mm,
So, we probably all follow the same people and through the Instagram reels and everything else, but the power of different breathing techniques
yep.
and how it can literally, we're the only species in the world apparently that can regulate our anxiety levels or the amount of cortisol or whatever else that's pumping through our bloodstream
Yep.
just by breathing.
Yep.
So whether it's the double inhale through the nose, the long exhale through the mouth, or whether it's the box breathing, or whether it's 5-6 seconds in, 5-6 seconds out. If I'm super stressed for some reason, that's my go-to, just to bring myself back. I'm a bit of a geek on all this stuff. I track my heart rate variability. I see the positive impact on that.
Yep.
And then in terms of connecting to self, it really is. So I talk about energy and time a lot in the book, and it's giving myself space for me to gain energy and to gain time. It's one of the reasons I moved to Malta.
I was
Going
going to
back to our
say,
outset.
clearly.
Yeah, just being, I prefer blue on blue rather than gray on green.
Yeah.
So sitting in the sun, feeling the sun,
Ugh.
whether it's at sunrise during the daytime, it doesn't really matter. Creating space every day just to sit in the sun and feel the sun on my skin kind of just reconnects me to myself in a wonderful way.
Oh, gosh, I want to go to
I'm
Malta
so
right
sorry.
now.
I'm
No,
going to
don't
send you some sun over
apologize.
to Canada. Yeah.
Taking it in. Now, my last question is around connecting to something bigger than ourselves and specifically through music.
Yeah.
So, what is a song or genre of music that does that, connects you to something bigger than yourself?
So anybody who knows me knows that I listen to music pretty much nonstop all of the time. And I love dance music. There's a certain types as well. I don't know whether you call it happy or melodic, but there's a certain type. They're the dance music. You might hear them playing in Ibiza at sunset, that kind of thing. Like, just when I hear that, I just want to throw my hands in the air. I want to dance. I feel it with my soul, brings a smile to my face. And it just reminds me, yeah, gosh, this life is worth living Let's live it.
Well, when I think of dance music, I love British music. Like when I
Right.
think back, because I like you, I just have a love of music. I go to concerts all the time. But my most favorite band in the whole wide world is a band out of Britain, Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark.
Ah,
And I go see them anytime they tour, but I just love Britpop. I love them.
right.
Yeah. And then I don't know. I just think dance music, one day I'll make it over to the UK and get into a dance club over there. But
Yeah,
well, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the
likewise.
show.
Thank
Where
you for
could our
inviting me.
listeners find you? Just social media?
Yes, it's funny every time I get asked this question, I realize I should be doing more, but LinkedIn is always a great place. I share a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. I have a personal webpage, which is mark-bateman.com.
Yep.
And the WeQual company address is WEQAL, wequal.com. Those are the three best places, really.
All right. Well, we'll make sure that those are in the show notes. And I know where you're going after this podcast. My guess is you're heading outside.
I actually have my leadership team over from the UK and they're going, oh my God, it's so blue and so warm. So yeah, we're going out for a meal. Yeah.
Well, I will be there in spirit with you. And thanks
Excellent.
again for coming on the show, Mark.
My absolute pleasure.
So, one thing I learned today is that Malta sounds like a beautiful place and that there's such thing as a digital nomad visa. Although it's not realistic for us to all get one of those visas and move to Malta, what we did learn from Mark is it is extremely realistic and needed to get connected to your purpose. That is the best way to disrupt the status quo and to really connect to what is meaningful for you. It's not always going to be that first thought, that first answer about what your purpose is, but really digging deeper. I know I'm going to do a bit more digging. As I shared with you a few weeks ago in my own solo podcast, I thought my purpose was a little bit different than what it was. And I think it's a good idea to continue to reconnect with it and make sure that it is truly what is guiding you. Thanks again for tuning into the podcast. Really appreciate your following us. And if you love what you're hearing, hey, even if you just like it, feel free to share it with a friend. And if you could, please leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to. Once again, I'm Carolyn Swora. You can find me at carolynswora.com and you can find me on social media at Carolyn Swora. Thanks for tuning in and we'll see you next week.